Folks, we fucked up.
Nice.
But
Nice.
here's why.
Yeah.
Here's why. So originally, we had uploaded this episode reviewing Inside, a special by Bo Burnham. And we were at first fine with the episode, but then we took it down for a few reasons. And it was primarily because of this. This piece is an immensely emotional, vulnerable, it really picks at Bo's insecurities and does an immense deep dive into depression and anxiety, and it is also a tremendously uncomfortable thing to look at. And the issue with the sort of review that Mac and I put up originally was that all of those descriptors I just gave the piece, and for that, like, we also both loved the piece.
Yeah.
For those reasons, because there isn't anything like it.
Yeah.
But we treated all of that as a given. So the review that we originally put out lacked the framework. It lacked that at the front end. And so we did immediately a dive into the sort of critical analysis and the structure of the piece.
Like for and I'm sure that this was the case for Danny as well. After we had seen the piece, we talked to the people around us about it a lot. Like it's in the zeitgeist, and we talked to a lot of people about it. And because of that, we thought we spent enough time praising it to each other that by the time we got to recording, we had already thought up all of the things that we wanted to criticize, and had already done all of the praising, which is unfair to an audience that's listening to our review for the first time, because you didn't hear us praising it for weeks on end before we got to the review.
Correct. And even though we praised it on the back end of the episode, it was quite a little bit too late.
A good 45 minutes too late, where we didn't on the very on the front end, like you said. Yeah. Really get our opinions clear. So this is our piece of clarity, hopefully.
Correct.
That if you stay to the end of the episode, I promise you will get to the piece where we do give it its due diligence, and we do praise it for what it is.
And you're gonna hear the episode that follows, after this snippet, essentially uncut. Basically the same exact episode that we had originally put up, and now with this framework. And I also want to mention, I think, I still love this piece. This piece made me immensely uncomfortable, but in all the best ways.
Yeah.
There was a take during the episode I do want to walk back, and I'll just say that now, that originally I had stated that I don't think I learned that much from the piece, and I was completely wrong, because I've actively thought about Inside for days and days on end after viewing it, and how to negotiate the relationship with not only myself but the people around me as well. And so so much of what I did learn was actually about things that I didn't know, and things that I need to learn about. And I talk about it in the episode, which is essentially my blind spots that I have to people who suffer from depression and anxiety, and how I can communicate and help those other people, at least to the best that I can, and be there for them. And that's the sort of thing that I need to learn about, that this piece really put in the perspective for me. So I also wanted to get that out there. So there's a much clearer framework of approach. So now you know that Mac and I really did love this piece.
Truly. And on that same note, I in terms of my ability to learn from the piece, I will still say that I did not learn a whole lot from the piece, but that is purely because I was not in a place to learn. I was not in a place when I was watching it. I was expecting a full comedy special, and so I was kind of in a critical mindset, so I wasn't in a place to fully receive it in its totality. I was in a place to receive comedy, not necessarily a piece that really actually tries to teach you about anxiety and depression from the perspective of someone that is dealing with it in real time. that is what it is, but that is not where I was mentally when receiving it the first time. And that's something that you get, especially in the viewing of it, and then listening back to each individual song. The songs is where, like, the comedy and the quirky bits are, and that's where I've consumed the most of the special. So I'm sure that if I went back, I would feel differently about that. But yes, so hopefully that gives a little bit of a frame for the meat of this episode.
A better context into sort of like what we had already thought.
Right.
We both love the piece. There isn't anything like it. And before you even start listening to this episode, do yourself a service and go ahead and watch it.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the episode.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to an episode of the Artenders with Mac and Dan. I am Dan, he is Mac.
Howdy!
So we are going to discuss a comedy special, but not in the traditional sense. It's not done in front of an audience. No, it was done essentially in one room, and that is Bo Burnham's Inside.
Theoretically in one room. We'll get into that.
Yeah. It was released on Netflix on May 30th, 2021. It was written, starring, music by, cinematography, edited by, and directed by Bo Burnham, who is a comedian who has really popped into frame in the past 10 years or so, partially because of, the beauty of the internet and how easy it is to get there. Yeah, through YouTube, through Vine, was an app that was popular some years ago, and
for those youngsters.
Yes, but he is a musical comedian, and that is definitely in form for this one. Now, this is technically my pick, but this was more so like Mac's influence of a pick, which like I had not seen it prior to reviewing it for this episode. But Mac, you had seen it prior, correct?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, do you mean the special?
Yes, this special in particular. Not Bo Burnham, the comedian, who is a fantastic comedian. Let's just get that on the front end. But this special you had seen before we had seen it to review.
I've been very interested in Bo Burnham since the age of maybe 13, which I guess is almost 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been following him for a very long time. The second he came out with Inside, I watched it immediately with Emma, and then I've seen it a few more times. I've listened to the music pretty much nonstop for the past couple weeks, about 2 weeks. And may I explain my viewpoint on it, like my experience in having watched it several times?
Yes, because part of it for me, I'm just going to say without even really like directly discussing it, is that like this isn't something I would want to watch again.
Yeah, right.
And I'm not saying it's bad, because it's quite great, but like I wouldn't want to watch it again.
Yeah.
But yes, I'm really interested in like what makes you so fascinated by it, why rewatch it multiple times, and then what kind of like discussion are you hoping to have because from the watch of it and the experience of it?
So I actually decided before I even saw it the first time that I was going to watch it several times, or I was going to consume even the music several times, because that's how I've always consumed Bo Burnham. Ever since I was young, whenever he releases something, I will listen to it, and then every time that I revisit it, there's something new that I find. He's very, very good about that, like about the detail work, and about the very subtle metaphor and whatnot within his within the stuff that he writes. And so it does take a couple watches for me to really grab everything that he's throwing out. Now, I think that with this one specifically, I'm not going to get into a big review of his other stuff. I hope that was enough on explaining how much I do respect him.
Sure, yeah.
But upon this special being released and watching it a few times, the first time I watched it, I didn't like fall in love with it necessarily. I did think it was very good, though. I thought it was very smart and really impressive. I think that's the main word. that we can all agree on is that, yes, it was impressive. But the more that I've been listening to it and watching it, like I would say like the second and third time that I listened to it all the way through, I got even more impressed and I liked it even more. And then it started to bother me.
Okay.
Over time, I started to like it less and less. And I'm kind of in this weird limbo right now of there are some clever parts, but overall, it's a very frustrating piece.
What makes you say that?
I would say that it's very frustrating because it is, it offers a lot of problems without any solutions.
Okay.
And I think that I only came to that conclusion, that realization, because that's something that I'm struggling with right now in my own stuff that I'm writing. That there are a lot of things that I will write, and I think that certain problems are interesting or certain ideas are interesting, but it's not that I actually have any sort of perspective on them. I just think they're interesting enough to write about.
Right.
And so by the end of it, it's like, yes, it was interesting that we dove into it, but no one's taking away anything. There's no new ideas that have been brought to the table.
Yeah.
And I think similar to this, that was the big problem that I saw with making a piece about COVID, or about experiences that we've had in COVID. I think the more that I've looked into this, yes, it is extremely entertaining. Well, the first half's entertaining, and the second half is difficult.
Yeah.
Safe to say?
Yes. Well, but like, okay, like it's really tricky to unpack this whole thing.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of explained on the front end. Hey, I'm just kind of putting this thing together, and because I'm thinking about killing myself, and we're gonna get into
pretty
that
much
more. But like, and so yes, he says that on the front end. This is not going to be cohesive, and it's so very clearly a pandemic work, right? We've looked at a pandemic work before. It's Taylor Swift's album Folklore, right? But this is very different
because it's very aware of its COVID-ness.
Right.
Yeah.
Where like there's a very different sort of approach that T Swizzle had, where like, okay, this anxiety that I'm having during this time, let me channel it into music, and into like new work. And then with Bo Burnham, it's like, no, I want to like discuss what's happening right now, right? Not channel into something else. Like channel into music, sure, but not into something different than what I'm actually experiencing in the moment. But so
and that is what he's famous for. I mean, and that's what comedy is. Comedy is people being brave enough to get up on a stage and say something that everyone's thinking, but that everyone is too afraid to say. Yeah, and they're willing to say it, and he does that. But in this instance, it might not be worth it. I don't think that the second that all of us got thrust into COVID, it was interesting because we all were like, man, we really want to write something about COVID, or man, we really want to make something about COVID. Yeah. But the problem is that it lacks retrospect. Yeah. We can't talk about COVID in the past
that we were all prisoners of that moment.
Yeah, because we were all,
like how you view 2019 as the best year in film, because you're a prisoner of that moment.
Shut up. Shut the fuck up. No, we're 2 years out, and looking back, I can now say I've never experienced a year of movies that was so amazing. But, I'm saying that Bo Burnham cannot, that's the wrong word, but it's difficult for someone to make a piece about COVID because there's no perspective to be had on COVID. Right. It's just a thing that was, and it sucked, and we're waiting for it to fully be over.
It just so happens to be that like pieces that are about COVID are like pieces about what I'm experiencing right now, as opposed to like what I'm experiencing then. And because I agree, part of the problem of the piece, right, if you wanted to constitute it as a problem, is the incohesiveness, right? But that's part of also what makes the piece. So it's really tricky of like, there are good things about it, and the good things are that he is like, it's sort of this very intimate exploration of his own psyche that it just happens to be channeled in this fashion, right? Yeah. And so it becomes a lot less filtered because of how it was produced and how sort of not shoddily, but it's put together in a fashion where it's just in my room and this is what I can do at this present moment, right? As opposed to I am making this perfect piece that is being workshopped extensively. It's like, no, this is just what he's experiencing right then and there, and then he's putting it out into the universe. And in terms of like pandemic works, in terms of like COVID works that about COVID, about what people were experiencing during the pandemic, that this is, I think it's safe to say, I haven't consumed a lot of it, but I think it is safe to say that this is certainly one of the better ones of it, right? Like this is one of the better ones.
Show your kids to talk about COVID. And that makes sense. And I think that it is in that way, it is an excellent diary piece. And that, like, a look back at this time, a look back at, man, all the crazy shit we went through during COVID, the experiences that we had, the things that we all collectively experienced as a culture, especially in America. He really hit all that on the head. But you started to get into something that also kind of pisses me off. Because there's the fact that he brings up so many issues that he is not willing to even offer a solution. Even if it's the wrong solution. He's not even willing to offer a single solution on many of those things. Like, oh, go ahead.
No. I want you to give an example, please.
So he'll talk about how depressed he is and how difficult it is to be alone in COVID and how he doesn't want to quit working on something because just the act of working on something makes him forget about all these awful things that are happening. And he's talking about depression and sadness and how he's going to kill himself and all these things. And then it's just done. And then it's just over.
Wait, what do you mean? Well, what do you mean? Well, like, why is that an indictment? I'm confused on what you're trying to say.
It's difficult for me because he, in terms of like story, because I think that it's safe to say, or I guess this might actually not be safe to say, maybe this is a hot take. I think he ventured away from...
I don't know what a hot take is.
Sizzle serve.
Thank you.
So sorry. Thank you for that. I think that it is maybe a sizzle serve that he started to venture away from the comedy special, the conventional comedy special, because he has done this before in other comedy specials, and into more of a story, and into more of a film.
Okay, so you wanted him to be more consistent thematically?
No, it's more like if he is going to venture into a story, then he should actually tell me a story.
Okay.
And he did not.
But wouldn't the story of this piece be about himself?
Yeah. The story would be, I am incredibly sad. I am bogged down. I cannot handle this pandemic.
Yeah.
And then that's the end. Does he ever conquer it? No.
Does he
ever really like, try to?
Well, yeah.
Just by doing the thing, maybe he's trying to.
I would say yes, yeah.
Maybe he's trying to put the Band-Aid on it, but it feels like he's offering a lot of issues without any resolve.
But hold on. I mean, like, and look, this is where I guess, we're just going to get into the conversation of it, but like, so like, I have the blind spot, right? We all have blind spots one way or another, right? Because there are 6-7 billion people out there. We can't possibly empathize with every single experience, right? And so part of the blind spot that I'm working to make less blind is like depression and like the exploration of work when depressed. And so my experience watching this was like the first like quarter was like, man, I'm laughing, and then not even halfway through I'm like, this guy's dealing with issues, right? But I can't expect him to be like super duper like cohesive about it, because I mean, and like part of it too, it's so easy to say like, well, Bo, this isn't working for you, why don't you go get some help? That's so much more difficult. And so it's difficult also for me to say like, yeah, he can't provide any answers, and that's frustrating, sure, but like, he can't provide any answers because how can he provide any answers? But he doesn't even have the answers to begin with of like how to solve his own shit. Yeah. Right? And so like and that's what makes this piece so tricky to even not just discuss but also consume. It's the sheer fact of like, we are witnessing a man lose his mind, that there is a reality, right? There's a very plausible reality that after he finished this working on this piece, he killed himself, right?
Yeah.
Like that is a very possible reality, and that's the scary part for me of like watching this, because like I kind of look at it through the perspective of like, if I were his friend and I'm like halfway through this piece, I'm like, I don't know if this is like working for you in the way that you want it to work for you, or it's just like, can you and me, like, can we together find different or new or avenues alongside this to really not get to the bottom of, but like try to alleviate the issue a little bit, because yeah, this entire piece was a band-aid, and I didn't expect by the end of it to like have an answer, right, in regards to what this piece is, or like what this piece is trying to achieve. And that can be an indictment, sure. Like, I'm not entirely certain who exactly this piece is for. Is this piece for me that like needs a better understanding of people who suffer from depression and mental illness and anxiety, or is it people who do identify with that, who do experience that, or is just like somewhere in between or somewhere outside of that? Who is this piece for? I'm not entirely sure, but that's the scary part about it to me. But it's difficult for me to say that like, oh, this is an indictment of like it being all over the place, because of course it's going to be all over the place, because his mind's all over the place.
Yeah.
So like it can be an indictment just strictly from a storytelling perspective, but from like a human exploration of the psyche perspective.
Yeah,
it isn't. And
right.
It's such a pandemic work, because like shit, most of the stuff during the pandemic isn't super duper clean.
Right.
You know, like folklore is such an anomaly. It's such an exception to that rule, where it is very clean and it is very produced. While like the production of this is just like how well Bo Burnham did in terms of the actual production of it, but not because he was working alongside others. So that's the tricky part about it. I'm kind of going all over the place with my thoughts in regards to this one, but
no, I
it's you have to like look at it in two different veins, right? You have to look at it from a storytelling perspective, sure, if you want to, but then you also do have to separate it from like, what is he, the human, exploring, right? Because this is unlike any comedy special ever, right?
Yeah.
Because
True.
I would also say this isn't a comedy special. I would just say this is a short film. Right.
Yeah.
I wouldn't,
short film.
I wouldn't, or just a film.
Yeah.
Film.
90 minutes.
Yeah. It's, you know, like I would hardly call this a comedy at all, where like, at least for me, I was having trouble breathing throughout it. But
yeah, I mean that was something that, but that's something that Bo Burnham's been doing since the literal beginning. I mean, I guess not the literal beginning, because that was YouTube. But whenever he started doing comedy, he was very clever about, and the reason that he was such a big ass deal and everyone loved him so much is because he was really good about tricking you into thinking that you were coming to a comedy special, so that you were allowed and given permission to laugh and be loud and have as much of a visceral response to his show as you would to a comedy special.
Yeah.
And then at the very end reveal to you that it is not at all a comedy special, and it's extremely vulnerable.
And this seems to be also like a trend that comedians have been doing recently. Like, he's not the only one to do that. Hannah Gadsby has done that with her first special, Nanette, and then also Daniel Sloss.
Daniel Sloss is a big one. James Acaster is another big one. All those British people. Yeah, and I think that's where I get really, really frustrated with this piece. The thing that makes me the most angry about this piece is that I wish that Bo Burnham, I don't know, had any distance between himself and the person he's on stage.
Yeah.
Or that he explained better or made it more clear that the person he's on stage is not the person that he is in real life. Mm-hmm. Because in past specials, whenever he does things or says things or things come from him, it is extremely personal and you buy into it. And this time, it was hard for me to do that because he talked so much, and the piece was dependent upon him being alone,
Yeah.
trapped in this room.
Yeah.
He was not. This was his guest house in his extremely large Los Angeles home. He was not alone. He has pets and a wife, and his parents were there. He, like, the image that he was trying to paint for this was not the actual reality that he was living in.
Yeah. Even though the experiences were real.
Yeah, and I think the emotions were real.
Yeah.
But,
there we go. That's the word.
Yeah, but every single time that he would talk about like certain things or certain things like, man, I'm just so upset like with being trapped in this tiny room. Isn't it so tough trying to relate to, I guess, most of America, because that is what a lot of people experienced during COVID. I just couldn't help but think, like, that's not what you're experiencing. Like because I am such a fan, and because I do follow him on social medias and things like that, I know his circumstances, and they're fine. Like,
sure, I mean,
I understand that he is depressed or anxious, and it's okay, like, for him to talk about that, and it's okay for him to make a piece in which he convinces the audience that he is in this small area. But it's tough whenever it feels like it's coming from him, the person Bo Burnham, because that's not actually the experience that him, the person Bo Burnham, is having.
Gotcha. So you felt a little bit of dishonesty of the sort of like approach to it, and not necessarily the emotions, because the emotions are incredibly honest, and like to such a point, it's uncomfortably honest, right? In more ways than one.
Exactly, and I love that, and I'm okay with dishonesty, as long as it's made clear that it's dishonesty, or as long as it's made clear that it's a story or a character or something separate from him, because that really took me out every once in a while.
So you knew that on the front end before even watching it.
Well, the first time around, I would say the first half of my very first watch, I didn't really think about it too much, and then because he has an intermission, because he has like a little break.
Which is like 30 seconds. I mean, this is no intermission.
Right.
Like, okay, folks.
It's no Seven Samurai.
I was about to say, if you want an intermission, you watch like Seven Samurai.
You watch Seven Samurai.
Or if you want a more recent example, you watch The Hateful Eight, right? But like, this intermission of like, we're gonna do like 30 seconds, and it's just gonna say intermission. Like, no.
Yeah.
An intermission is like you keep that bleep going, right? And then in rare cases, like if that 10 to 15 minutes isn't enough time, then you pause the movie, right? But you can't put an intermission and then have it be 30 seconds.
Implying that the audience should be pausing.
Yeah, that was a weird dismount I also had, and so now I'm trying to...
That's actually an interesting point, though. So you think that whenever a movie is made and an intermission is given, you think that
I want it to be a legitimate intermission.
You want them to include the time of the intended intermission in the viewing.
Oh, that's helpful. Yeah, or like the little.
Or do you want it to
timer,
say a little timer, right?
A little timer on the screen,
or like something that's like
this is the weirdest thing to nitpick.
No. That's actually really interesting. Like because that's actually a super cool idea. Like, do you think that at like Netflix specials, things like that are intended to watch in the home whenever they have intermissions, do you think they should operate more like theater intermissions?
I think they should operate more like intermissions. Okay,
you got me.
There's a difference between intermission and like, hey, pause here. Like, no. An intermission. Listen, folks. I'm gonna unpack this right now. Then an intermission is not 30 seconds.
An intermission
15 seconds.
It's not a bathroom break.
An intermission is like, hey, there's my friends over there. I'm gonna talk to them. While I eat my M&Ms. You know what? Maybe I want a snack. Maybe I want to go pee. Maybe I want a bottle of water that's like $10. Like what if I want those things? Then to have the time, the avenue to do so, and then when I know to sit back down, the lights will flash in the house. All right, enough. I will die on this hill. I will be on this hill, and I will die, and I'm fine with that. And I know this is the weirdest thing to nitpick, but if you're gonna say intermission, I want an intermission.
No,
I want an intermission.
I get you, pal. I get you. Well,
this is not the worst part of this piece.
No, but if we want to go back in theater history, an intermission originally was meant to be a pause in the story so that the audience could discuss what was happening in the story. It was a catch-up. Because it was so difficult to watch live theater and actually get everything, because it was so noisy and because they weren't able to fully get like the entire experience, the intermission was meant to okay, so like, did you see when or like, what do you think's gonna happen next,
Yeah.
or whatever. So yeah, I definitely think that's funny. That's funny. That's actually, I think, a really good idea.
Or sometimes a break in time and scene change, right? Where
maybe we're seeing like they want to keep it like vaguely a unity, and so they want for the first half to take place in one whole succinct place,
right?
And then have the second half be in a whole succinct place,
right?
Yeah, that might be a decent idea. Anyways, sorry. Yeah, let's get back to the actual piece that we're reviewing. Yeah. The next thing that I would say is up on the docket for me in terms of things that I have endlessly talked about with other people about this piece is the fact that he talks so many times about how he is a comedian. He talks a lot about how he is going to make comedy, and that is the most noble thing that he can possibly do. He did it in this special at the very beginning when he was oh man, what's the song called? I can't exactly remember what that song is called.
Okay, but you have to describe it to me because I don't know that song.
It's the very beginning. It's the very beginning.
Can you help me out?
It's the very first song. Very first song.
Okay, it's content.
Yes. Or also comedy. Both the songs really are about how he is going to. He doesn't know what his place is in this pandemic, or with like world events that are happening or whatever, or Black Lives Matter, or anything, or is how I should just leave it. And but what he has decided is that he is going to solve the world's problems by making comedy, which is a funny idea.
Yeah,
and it is funny.
That he's so self-righteous.
Yeah,
yeah. I'm so important. I will solve everything.
Or oh man, one of my favorite parts of the whole damn special. Whatever. He's like, I'm gonna be like a white guy that's an agent for change. Like oh no. There's a pause in the song, and then or like a key change, and he's like, I'm a special type of white guy.
Yeah,
that's funny. And then
thanks, Mac.
No, it is funny. Sorry, it just is. But also that he goes into that he's like, I'm going to step aside so that other people can speak, like the voices that are more important. And then he takes a moment, about like 8 seconds, and then he goes, I'm bored. And then he starts singing.
You're being gracious. It's much less than 8 seconds. It's
really?
It's like 3 seconds.
It's funny though. It's funny.
Yeah. For sure.
And he always talks about himself as a comedian, right? Mm-hmm. But I don't think he is. Because he talks so much about how he defines him he defines what a comedian is himself. He defines what a comedy special is himself, which is I'm going to make people laugh, and that is how I'm going to help them. I'm going to help them by making them laugh. And that's what he does in the first half, and then he makes a specific fucking choice to not in the second half.
There are still funny
parts
in the second half, right?
But that is not his intention.
Like Welcome to the Internet is a funny song. Oh, there's a song where he's in this weird like grass robe freaking ghillie suit, and he's like, congratulations, Jeffrey Bezos, you won. Yeah. It's so like that is funny stuff that is like happening, right? But at least for me, in my experience, like it was too late that I was like, I can't
find
laugh.
This funny.
I can't laugh, which is fine.
But I think that Bo Burnham's aware of that.
Yeah,
is my thing. That's kind of that's not an issue, but I think it's something that I find incredibly interesting. Which is I think that if he views comedy as something that is meant to cheer the audience up from their their average depressive state, he made a specific choice to stop caring about that about halfway through. Like, he was still funny. Yeah. But he knew that it's depressing as shit.
But then I think maybe yes, and then maybe.
So do you think that he's not?
But maybe there's a shift in the process of doing this where like originally it was to like at the very, very beginning, maybe it was like to just put something out there for other people to have, right? To make content, right? Yeah. But then it became like, this is actually for myself. I want to explore myself more. And that's more important to me now, as opposed to trying to endear to the desires of the masses and what they are currently looking for. And then if you're hearing tapping in the background, I'm just trying to filibuster a little bit, but Mac is currently searching one of... Is this his first comedy special, Make Happy? No, it's his third. It's his third. It's definitely a very, very popular one. Why are you looking at
I'm looking this up because there is a song in Make Happy that I actually think proves a point of mine that is extremely important with what I'm trying to say. So what I'm trying to say is this: that he does. It's not like throughout the process of this, he just started to realize that maybe he doesn't want to like make people laugh anymore. I think this was intentionally planned because this is something he does in every special.
Hold on, but if it was intentionally planned, wouldn't the whole piece be more cohesive, right? Because I've never felt incohesiveness in his comedy specials, in his traditional comedy specials.
Yeah.
Or at least, I mean, I haven't seen them in years, admittedly, but like I said, there was never a moment where I'm just like, this is all over the place mentally, or like in terms of the structure of the piece, right?
I feel like
everything still felt purposeful, as opposed to like inside that it was like just purposeful, like in that moment, but they weren't necessarily connected in a way. Right?
I think that the
or like in a connected experience.
The other specials don't feel disconnected because they're filmed as comedy specials, and comedy specials inherently are a little discombobulated, or like they have segues from one thing to the next.
Yeah.
But he even mentions, like in his other specials, he'll even like have jokes about like, I'm bad at segues, and then he goes into his next song.
Yeah.
Or like he'll like dance to the next song or whatever because he doesn't know how to get from one thing to the next. So I think that because he filmed the others as comedy specials, that's what makes them feel less disorganized. This, I think, actually operates in a similar way, and he wrote this similarly as he would to a stand-up comedy special. But he did the same thing as he does in the other ones. In every comedy special, he at the very beginning tells you that it is his job as a comedian, as a person that is making the word comedy for you, that he's going to make you happy. That's why I make happy.
Thanks.
That he's going to make you a happier person by watching this, and that is going to make you feel better, and then you can leave having been fulfilled by being a happier person because of him. And then he doesn't. Mm-hmm. And he does that for most of it, and then at the very end, he doesn't. Like in Make Happy, for instance, at the very beginning, intro, Hell Yeah, I Love You, Masturbation, those two songs are made to tell you what he's trying to do, what he's trying to do as a comedian. And then once he hits Kill Yourself in Make Happy, and on, way easily all the way up to Can't Handle This, which is the Kanye rant, which is climax of Make Happy, and then Are You Happy? Those are not happy songs. Those are not songs that like make you laugh and go, oh yeah, like I'm so glad that we watched this. It's genuinely upsetting to watch those to watch those two songs, and the same with this. So I'm still wondering, I have been forever. Is he almost like mocking comedy, or is it mocking himself, or is it mocking us? I don't really know, but there is a specific reason that he is telling us at the beginning of every special, I'm here to make you happy, and then he specifically doesn't by the end. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, but I
don't know what it is, and it bothers me.
Well, and to answer your question, yes, right? I mean, but it's like, it's the idea of subverting expectations, right? And like I said, same thing that Hannah Gadsby and
but
Daniel
the only
Sloss
way to get
does.
a point across,
right,
and get people on board is by tricking them into thinking it's comedy,
right,
and then hitting them with the fact that it's not.
Yes, and so we are going to discuss that more after the break.
All right, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Now, just let me explain. First of all, it's free. Second of all, Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and a whole bunch more. And third, now this is really important, you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Hear me when I say no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Folks, welcome back to this wonderful episode of the Artenders with Mac and Dan. So, Mac, That's your name, right?
That's me.
Perfect, because I just want to confirm.
What the hell?
And, okay, but in all seriousness, I wanted to ask you a follow-up question in regards to the conversation that we were just having before the break, which was in regards to Inside. And you touched on it a little bit, but now I want you to sort of examine it a bit more in regards to Bo Burnham's previous acts.
Me. Okay.
Did you learn something?
About what?
About yourself. In this piece, did you learn something about yourself? Did you learn something? I mean, we all learned something about Bo Burnham in this piece, right? Like that's without even a thought, right? Like, of course. Because I mean, the irony of it is that he wasn't in front of people and yet put a piece of work that was like the most vulnerable ever, right? That like it wasn't in front of an audience where he was super vulnerable, right? Whereas like in his like traditional medium, right? He was the most vulnerable by himself, which I mean makes sense, but it's also like then he filmed it and put it out there, right? But I was thinking of like that statement that you had in the beginning of the first segment, and then I was also thinking about Daniel Sloss's X, which I had seen relatively recently, like last week or so. Nice. And then I was also thinking about Hannah Gadsby's Nanette. And particularly with Nanette and X, with those two respective specials, that I felt like after the end, I had learned something about myself and about like what sort of role I play in the life that I live, right? I learned something. Was that the case for you in Bo Burnham's Inside? And was that the case in Bo Burnham's previous specials? Did you learn something, at the very least, about yourself? And so yeah, was that a thing that you had experienced at the end of viewing this, however many times you viewed it?
No.
Because the extent, okay,
no.
Okay, but the extent of like what I experienced about myself was like, oh shit, like. Okay, these blind spots are coming out, right? I need to address these blind spots a little bit more of, like, how do I, as a person who doesn't deal with depression, which I'm very, very fortunate and privileged to be one of those people, like, as that individual, what can I do to better understand, sympathize, and help others that even if they don't need the help, what can I do in order to like be there for them in some capacity?
So do you think it did a good job of representing depression or giving you a new perspective on what a person's depression might look like?
Yes, because I had never seen depression on screen like that.
Okay.
So, I mean, but so vulnerable. I mean, but to the point where just like in the second half, there were funny things and I was not laughing, right? Because I'm just like the entire time, I'm like, is this man okay?
Yeah.
Right? Is this man eating? Like, that was a thought that I had. I mean, like, now knowing that it was in his guest home, I feel a little bit better. But, like, just seeing that kitchen and so consistently throughout the piece, too, you see equipment all over the place. And so that includes, like, a little bit of the kitchen that you do see. And so there's equipment all over the kitchen. So I think to myself, like, is this guy eating?
Yeah, right.
Right? But so, like, I didn't necessarily learn something about myself, but I learned, like something that I need to address, and I learned a lot about Bo, which is fine, but it does make me curious about like just the experience of like the piece afterwards and the experience of reevaluating and taking it all in. You said that you didn't learn anything new, right? Like I didn't learn anything new about myself.
About myself, yeah. I didn't learn anything about myself necessarily. Honestly, the funniest parts of the special were the parts that were the most relatable. So, whenever he'd write a song about something that I just like agreed with his perspective, and so I was like, oh man, so true. And then the parts about depression I thought were interesting. I thought they were a new take, in that I haven't seen someone dive into depression while fully alone. Mm-hmm. That I think was cool. Like to have a person sitting in a space with only a camera and really actually try to explain with words and with theatrical elements
and like imagery as well,
trying to explain what they're feeling at that moment. I think that was cool and difficult probably to do.
But I mean, it had to be incredibly difficult. Yeah.
I wouldn't say that it was necessarily. I don't think it necessarily taught me a whole lot in terms of like, again, like I learned a lot about Bo and what he is going through. I don't feel like I learned anything about like what depression is as a whole, or how I would better help someone with it, or if it started creeping up with me to alleviate that,
which is fine.
Yeah.
Right, like we're being
hypercritical.
Look, yeah, we were being super duper critical.
Very,
right?
very.
We have not talked about enough how incredible this piece is.
Yeah, we really
and
haven't.
Like, mind you, we are like 40 minutes in, so we're a bit late.
Sorry about that.
We are sorry.
Excellent though,
because
really,
like,
yeah.
I should have said this at the very, very beginning, honestly. Where, like, let's also acknowledge the fact that Bo Burnham did something more than I certainly did during the pandemic, and most of us did during the pandemic. Right?
Yeah.
And so, but like, I mean, we all channeled this shit, and excuse me, to be more specific, the boredom and the like, I need to do something of the pandemic. You and I, Mac, we channeled it into this.
This was what we did. Yeah. Yep.
Right. And so, and Bo Burnham channeled it into this immaculately impressive piece that took so much time. It took over a year for him. And we saw on camera him celebrating his 30th birthday. And in the most
God, that's
just like devastating way, because he's just looking at a clock and watching it hit midnight. Like it's Cinderella at the ball, but not, I mean, just sad and just like this like lull that's just being forced on him. But like all the credit to him that like it was written, directed, filmed, edited by, and it's just him. It's just him. It's just him. There are other people that helped in the post-production, but during the pre and production, it was just him. And it's so impressive. Like, I mean, that's the one thing, right? Like, do I want to watch this again? No, because of how uncomfortable that makes me feel. And like, that's fine. I know that. And like, I'm privileged in that regard that I'm able to be like, no, I don't want to deal with this now, so I'm not going to watch it. Yeah. Like, that's when there are people out there who deal with this actively every single day.
In a way.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And that, I mean, and also what I did appreciate about it was like, it was the sort of thing where it was just, it wasn't super duper down your throat in the sense, but there was certainly a sense of like, don't look away, watch this.
Yeah.
You know, it was the, like, I'm being vulnerable right now, and not for the sake of like just being vulnerable, but also for the sake of just like, see this experience, right?
Yeah. There were,
and the imagery is hyper intensive.
Yeah.
From my understanding and from like discussions that I've had with other people, to the relationship one has with depression. And kind of like, so one of the funniest bits to me was for the song Unpaid Intern, which is just like 30 seconds, right? And then he does a review of that song, and then all of a sudden the review of that song pops up during that review, and then it's like it's like looking in a mirror. It's like when you're standing in between two mirrors, and then it looks like an infinite space. Is what is sort of happening. It's this sort of rabbit hole. And I was talking about it with someone, and they were like, yeah, it's surprisingly similar to an experience that I've had before, where I think about things from like I as if I'm standing back and I'm this like omniscient, have this viewing experience of like, this is so weird, like an out of body experience. And that's what they sort of equated to, in my opinion, the funniest part of the piece, right? And so like
pretty, And also,
I think there's so many. Listen, I'm sorry for cutting you off again, but there's so many effective parts during this. Does it lack cohesion? Sure, right? But it's not meant to be cohesive. Do I learn something at the end of it? A little bit, not as much as preferably I would like, right? Like in comparison to Parasite, I feel like I learned a lot more about myself than.
Oh yeah.
But that's just how those two pieces are constructed from one another. But there isn't a more quintessential pandemic work than this one. And I can only imagine, because I'm so ignorant of it. I can only imagine the experience it was for people to not have an outlet during this pandemic when they were just stuck at home. When they didn't have a sort of creative outlet, that maybe for some of those people, maybe family and or friends wasn't a feasible thing to communicate with for them, right? Like this, it painted such a picture that it's just, you have to watch it, right? So like, would I recommend this piece? I don't know, but you have to watch it. And that was such a big experience for me. Just once again, did I necessarily learn something? Maybe, yeah, perhaps, and not as much as I would like. But also, that's not the point. And so what is the point of this piece? There kind of is no point. It's just an exploration of the psyche that's put to the screen. And that alone and the execution of it is fucking impressive.
Yeah.
I mean, it's legitimately great.
Yeah.
And the songwriting is, although the lyricism in particular is what I'm most impressed with, right? The production is like, some of it, I mean, it's all coming from the same like place sound-wise, sure, for a lot of it, for a good amount of it. But like, lyrically, there's always some sort of criticism or some sort of astute observation that is done in such a clever way, and the execution is always beautiful. I wish I said all these things in the first part before we really started critiquing.
I will say though, on the music, but whenever you start watching, especially, you never ever take the music seriously. You're just listening for the lyrics. But this time, he really stepped his music game up.
Yeah.
Like, there were plenty of times throughout the special, or even just listening to it afterwards, where I was like, this song kind of hits. This is not bad.
And this is also like a borderline musical.
It really is, yeah.
It's just very much so like on that edge of being a musical, right?
Yeah.
Where it's these, I mean, it's just a bunch of songs and then they're connected by some, in this case, monologue, never really, for the most part, dialogue, right?
Yeah, right.
But the music is so impressive,
really
and it's
stellar.
unlike any musical, really.
Yeah, and we actually, me and a friend were talking about how there were so many songs within the special that reminded us of other styles of songs. And it was kind of funny, like you could hear him ripping off, or hear him satirizing is the word I'm looking for. Other artists. So like Shit, that song.
Yeah.
Like Wake Up at 11:30.
The song called Shit. Yes.
Yeah, Feeling Like a Bag of Shit. Is such a clear ripoff of Bruno Mars. Uh-huh. Like Bruno Mars makes that exact same sound.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously Welcome to the Internet reminds you a lot of like a Disney villain song.
Yeah.
Like he looks like it, the way he shoots it, but especially the sound. Like he goes for that shit.
Yeah.
Or like White Woman's Instagram. FaceTime with my mom tonight sounds like such a Justin Bieber song.
Yeah.
Hilarious. Like I liked that. He actually like had a specific direction with the composition of each song.
Yes, and it's also what's so interesting too is that maybe this is an indictment. Maybe this is a sort of plus to it. But like the songs also feel incredibly disjointed from just like the monologues that he would have.
Yeah.
Right? Or just like other segments that he would have during the piece, right? Like for example, there's one that he's imitating a streamer, and it's like and saying jargon that of course like streamers would just casually say, and then he's playing essentially a game which is just himself moving around like a funny character.
Oh, that part. I was talking about a different part.
Right, but that isn't a song, right? So, and what's so interesting is that you can experience this quote unquote album and But that provides such a different experience to what is actually going on with the rest of the piece. So much so that that's only half of it, right? With so many musicals, like, all it really is just the music.
Yeah.
All it really is just the music. There's nothing beyond the music, because what's beyond the music is utter trash.
Yeah.
And that's, I think it's safe to say, most musicals. Fuck you, musicals. But that was...
Oh, man.
Wow. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry.
All musicals?
I'm sorry. Well, just... I mean, not all of them.
Danny?
I'm sorry.
Attack a more broad group.
Broadway.
Good God.
I'm sorry.
A whole subculture. My ass. A whole culture.
But to put the topic back on hand, yeah, so you can listen to this album through and through and get some of the gist of it, but you just need the imagery so bad for these songs, and then you need all the interludes in between. You need all of it, and that's what makes the piece, right? It's not just the music, it's the music with everything else, right? And if it was just the music, then I probably would still be laughing in the second half.
Yeah.
Right? If it was just the music, I would be having a much more ignorant but more happy experience in regards to the total cohesive / incohesive product. But I think it's like I said, I'm not sure if it's a good thing, and I'm not sure if it's a bad thing how disjointed the music is. But I mean, once again, I do really appreciate at the same time. Once again, do I know if it's a good thing? I don't know, but I appreciate for sure how much of an exploration this is. That I mean, like, I'll be honest, I don't want to explore that much shit personally to that degree of, like, finesse and that degree of polish for the most part, right? Not polish in terms of the overall storytelling and the cohesiveness of bit by bit, but just, like, to that detail of exploring it through imagery, through lyrics, through monologue, through etc., through lighting, and just emotional experience. I'm not comfortable exploring that personally.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, all the props to him for being that vulnerable for a fucking year putting this together, and then still choosing to finish it, and then still choosing to, like, edit it and put it out into the universe.
Yeah.
Where, like, he didn't have to do that. Sure. And part of it too is just like I wish he would have done something that was perhaps more fulfilling. Not it doesn't matter if it's fulfilling to him as an artist. Like, it got to a point to me that was like, what's fulfilling to you as a human? Like, what do you need right now? And that was the concerning part for me. But I'm still so in awe of him choosing to still do it and then to still put it out there, because that is one brave motherfucker, and much more brave than so many of us.
Yeah.
Where both, and I think he could probably say, yes, I did that. Like, he is putting on a mask for most of it, and yet at the same time, him putting on a mask exposes the rest of his body.
Oh, interesting.
And that is this piece.
Also another really cool detail is that, like, literally as the piece goes on, he gets progressively more and more naked until he's literally butt-ass naked.
Yeah.
Cool detail. And really,
definitely probably the most cohesive part about the whole thing.
Yeah, and something that I didn't notice until he was totally naked. And then I was like, oh my god, it's fucking Bo. Like, that's all him. Okay, so favorites, least favorites. What songs do you put top tier? What songs do you put bottom tier?
I'm gonna put the funny songs at top tier.
Then do it.
Right? Well, but
what are the funny songs to you?
And so the funny songs to me was just like, even though it's 30 seconds, I love Unpaid Intern and, like, FaceTime with my mom and How the World Works and White Woman's Instagram and Bezos 2 and Welcome to the Internet. Like, I love those songs because they're funny and because they're a window to something that I don't have to deal with for the most part.
Well, but also there are a couple, like, actually quite a few of those that hit me because I because he's so good with metaphor. He's so good with you buying into something and being like, oh, this is kind of like a funny concept.
Yeah.
And then him just like wringing it until it's dry and then making you feel like shit because he reminds you of like how this plays into reality.
And part of it's the imagery, right?
Yeah.
So I had that experience with FaceTime with my mom where
funny.
I listened to the song by itself first, thought to myself, that's funny as shit. Then I watched him perform it, and I'm like, I'm sad.
Yeah, because you're like, oh, damn.
Like, oh, this is a different experience for him
Yeah.
than it is for me.
Yeah.
In a way where it's just like, how do I connect with this person? I don't know, even though this person is my mother. I'm sorry for cutting you off.
No.
What were you?
No, I mean, like, I mean, in all these. So, like, how the world works. Funny, cute little concepts. I know that you're gonna get into like some depressing stuff. And
because the joke is the depressing stuff.
The joke is the depressing stuff.
Oh,
and I expect that, but then all of a sudden, I mean, I do not expect whenever he uses the fact that the puppet is the puppet's life is dependent on his hand being inside the puppet because it's a hand puppet. It's dependent on his hand controlling it in order for it to stay alive. And so he starts threatening the puppet that he's going to take his hand out of the puppet and then the puppet will no longer exist. And so the puppet starts begging him for life, like to keep him on his hand, which it then is more commentary on what they're talking about in the song. Super fucking clever. And like I don't expect that, but then it happens and it hits me over the head really hard. And he's really good at that, but he's good at that on an individual level. We talked about that. He's good at that within a song. Like he makes one song so clever, so smart. But in terms of like the overall piece, it is just like a kind of cobbled together of a bunch of really good individual pieces. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it reminds me of like a recent example, like Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where like I like that movie, but I would not call it cohesive.
No, I would say that's funny, I just watched that a couple days ago, that there are a lot of really good scenes or good moments in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Him talking to the little girl on set. His like improvised scene or whatever whenever they're filming, right. Or whenever Brad Pitt is at the Manson estate or the Manson ranch, right. That those moments are great, or like the flamethrower, but they are very kind of in the movie. Like in terms of story, it's not conventional storytelling.
Yeah.
Another excellent example: Welcome to the Internet. Oh. Chills whenever, because like at first you're like, oh, okay, like this is kind of like wild and like, oh, this is a clever idea, and then whenever he is like, you're addicted to it and you're dependent upon it, and we're so proud of the internet, we did it's doing exactly what we designed it to do. The second he said like what we designed it to do, and like we have been waiting for you, I mean, just ran chills up my spine. That I was like, that's a really, really excellent way of exploring the absolute disgusting, gross parts of the internet, and its origin and the reason that we're on it all the time. Apathy's a tragedy and boredom is a crime. Mm-hmm. Genius lyrics. And again, that song, spec-fucking-tacular. Mm-hmm. But it's just kind of there.
Yeah. And once again, it's there because it's just an exploration.
Right.
This whole piece is an exploration. And so it's tricky. It's tricky because we are typically not used to pieces that are just explorations. We're used to pieces that at least receive some sort of polish in the sense of like pre-production and like the beats are gonna happen here, and here. It's just like, no, I made all these beats. Let's put them together, which is fine. But and it's to, once again, the piece's detriment, but also to its benefit.
Because all the songs are excellent individually, do you think that this is better to be listened to as a soundtrack?
No,
you think it's,
I mean, you have to watch it.
Yeah,
you have to watch it
because that's what it was made for.
Yes, you're not going to get the story if you just listen to it. If you are listening to this right now for some reason you haven't listened to it or watch it, like don't just listen to the album because that's not the full story.
By story, do you mean idea? Like explored Beau's depression.
Would you say that there are musicals out there that you could just listen to the soundtrack and you get the whole thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hamilton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't need anything. I mean, Les Mis isn't just there's no
Les Mis.
There's no dialogue. Right?
Yeah.
It's just music.
Spring Awakening? Spring Awakening.
Yeah. But like where you are getting what? A quarter? A third? Maybe a half if you just listen to the tracks. It's so unfair. It's so unfair. Like I wouldn't show the music to anybody first. Like I would just say, just watch it. Right?
Yeah.
I would say that. One question as we sort of start to wrap things up, because I think it's going to be a bit verbose of a question, but I will explain it a little bit after I ask it, which is, were we, and when I say we, it could be you, it could be me, it could be just average Joe Schmo, any audience member. Were we ever laughing at Beau?
No.
The reason why, like, I thought of that question is because, like, sometimes, like, I think about, like, comedians, and, like, sometimes, like, comedians make self-deprecating jokes or something along those lines, right? And maybe about themselves or about their culture, about their race, about their ethnicity, about their gender, who they are, etc., etc. Where, for example, the most famous example is Dave Chappelle doing Chappelle's show.
Yeah.
And then in the middle of taping the third season, it's like, wait a second, everybody's laughing at me. Right, they're laughing about who I am and the culture that I am associated with. They're laughing at that, as opposed to just maybe, I don't know the specifics, but maybe like laughing at the general idea of like all this shit is like dumb, like we're stupid too, like it's just right, as opposed to like laughing with, and instead people were laughing at.
Yeah,
so that's why he left.
There are a lot of comedians that depend on that. I would go as far as to say, not in the later half of his career, not in the John Mulaney that we know, but I would say that early John Mulaney definitely did that a lot.
Yeah. Whereas like laugh at me.
Yeah, he was like, please, like me first, like laugh at me first.
Yeah.
And then once we got out of the way, like at the beginning of the special, then he gets into his actual content about things that he cares about.
Yeah.
But he really depended on. I look like a child. I look like I think the exact quote. I look like I was trapped in a windowless room for like 25 years, ate only saltine crackers and water, and just walked out on this stage. But I'm actually an alcoholic or whatever. He really depended on that shtick.
Yeah.
And then graduated from it. Right. But I don't think that Bo Burnham ever really.
And like, I don't think so either. Like, perhaps like during some songs, maybe, but I think I was just curious about the question, right?
Yeah.
And you may, you the audience member, or you Mac may had heard me just say in the middle of your thought, "Oh, I have a question," because I sometimes have trouble of just keeping thoughts to myself because of just how this podcast is constructed. But I did want to ask that question because, like. I don't know. I don't think so either. I don't think so either. And the intention was, I don't think, to laugh at him, unless maybe there were some parts of this is sort of like a self-deprecating way of like, laugh at me, right? There were, I mean, for example, the very end of the piece is him walking out of the guest home. It looks like it's like a set that's like rebuilt on stage. But
there's like a spotlight on him.
Yeah, and there's a spotlight on him, and he walks out of the guest home, and then he tries to like come back in, but the door is locked, and then everybody's laughing, right? And when I say everybody's laughing, I mean there's a laugh track that is edited in, of him trying to get back into the door. So like it's like he himself is laughing at himself, or he himself is looking at himself in this sort of introspective way. But I was just curious of like, when we laughed during this piece, were we ever laughing at Beau, or were we laughing with Beau? And I would like to think we were laughing with Beau, right? Like him singing "Congratulations, Jeffrey Bezos." Like we laugh because we're laughing with Beau. We're not laughing at Beau. We're not laughing at him saying, "Haha, you are also suffering under capitalism under Jeffrey Bezos. Look at you, fucker." Like no, it's beyond that of like, no, we're all suffering.
I think something that was really interesting though is that because there was no live audience, a lot of times in stand-up, whenever people start making fun of themselves like that, what gives you permission to laugh is hearing the audience laugh, or their cadence. They're subconsciously telling you that this is the spot to laugh at, right?
Yeah.
And with this, because there was no live audience, because of the way that he performed it, every single time that he made fun of himself, those were the moments when you stopped. You were laughing until he started making fun of himself, and then you were like,
"You're totally right.
I don't think I'm supposed to be laughing right
You're
now."
totally right.
But I'm wondering if he performed that for a live audience, if that would be different. If some of the audience, because you know how it works, we're both live theater guys. Whenever some part of the audience starts laughing, everyone feels permission to start laughing.
It's contagious.
It's contagious.
It's contagious.
Yeah, that's why we talk about. There's like one specific professor that whenever you watch something and he's also in the audience, you feel more permission to viscerally watch rather than passively watch.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering. Yeah, that's a good question. If it would be different live, I think it probably would, and I think that he would lose the depressing value. Not fully, but a lot of it, I think, with a live audience.
And it also depends on the audience, right? Where like with this, he can curate his own shit. Like,
well, also it would make sense in front of an audience because the whole thing is about his loneliness,
right?
So,
Yeah, exactly.
But also I think that.
But it also could make sense in front of an audience, right? Where it's just like once again, like it's just exposing yourself in a different way, like instead of a camera. And there are definitely moments of like during this piece where it's like hyper analyzing all the camera, and like the camera is this like sort of portal into this room, this scary, daunting portal, right? And so if he did explore this on stage, it would be different because it would be a different experience, and yet at the same time maybe more intimate, maybe not. Like it's difficult to say, but like in terms of the production, this is meant for a camera, and this is meant to be in one room. It's called Inside, right?
Yeah.
And so you get a lot more of that experience when the entire thing is taking place within those four walls, right? As opposed to there's a fourth wall, but
Screw you.
Mac.
Oh, I was gonna ask you the same thing. Go ahead.
Well, do you recommend it?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
You?
Yeah, I don't know if I want to watch it again, but I think like maybe I did learn something about myself, and maybe I'm not giving this piece enough credit because of how uncomfortable it made me, and like still being able to recognize that it's all over the place. But
interesting.
That's part of what makes it special too.
It's interesting and frustrating and thought-provoking, and yes, it is exactly what you expect from a Bo Burnham special.
It is immensely thoughtful for something that is so all over the place.
Yeah, true. Yes, lots of individual thoughts that are interesting.
Yeah,
all of them.
That I think maybe. Okay, hold on. I'm once again just walking back my take, but like maybe I would watch it again if like now better prepared with the lens of like everything is broken apart and they're not really bridges, they're more like different islands.
You should definitely listen to it again.
Listen to it?
You should definitely listen to it again. Because I think that I agree with the fact that you should watch it first time because that is what it was intended to do. And you're intended to feel sad in the moments when he wants you to feel sad, right? And that's great. And you know that now, and you've consumed that. But the most interesting parts and the parts that are worth revisiting because they're so complicated and so thought-provoking are the songs. Those are the things, in my mind, that are worth revisiting several times. Whereas maybe you might watch it one more time.
Yeah.
But you can listen to these songs for weeks and be not only entertained, but actively thinking.
Yeah. Fair.
Fantastic. So, what we're watching next week.
Yes, Mac. What are we watching next week?
So I was going to have you watch Human Centipede 3.
Jesus. But just the thought of it. The thought of it.
Where?
The thought of it.
I just want to say that the summary...
Oh my God,
the summary... No. While he's freaking out.
It.
The summary is that there's a prison... And the warden of the prison is having troubles with the prisoners. So what he's doing to punish all of them simultaneously is he's making a 500-person long human centipede.
That's awful. That's disgusting.
It's disgusting, I know.
It's so gross.
It's so thrilling. Okay. But
really? Oh.
It's hilarious. But anyways, we're going to watch another movie that is intentionally dog shit.
Okay.
Tusk.
Is that the one with Justin Long?
It's the one with Justin Long and Haley Joel Osment.
No.
Yep. Have fun.